Welcome to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. Your co-hosts, Jason Smith and Brian Bibbo, will inspire and teach you how to prosper in your mind, body, and spirit, not just your financial life. Joining forces with field experts, Jason and Brian are here to help you focus on what matters most in your life, living well.
Welcome to the J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. I'm excited to have the guest on here today. I've known him for quite so many years, Don Graves. He's the president and founder of the Housing Wealth Institute and instructor of retirement income at the American College of Financial Services. He's considered in the nation one of the leading educators on incorporating housing wealth into retirement planning. He is also the author of 3 books on the housing. Don, welcome to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast.
Brian, thank you so much. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I met you many years ago. I watched you speak at one of our events a decade ago, when the stigma of what we're about to talk today about is that reverse mortgages, right? It's such a stigma out there. And I know we'll get into that. But you have many accolades during your career, and you have this long established career. Where did this all start for you? Where did the passion for using housing in the retirement income planning or reverse mortgage come from you?
Sure. I have a very eclectic background, but I was CEO of a nonprofit called Habitat for Humanity in Philadelphia. My sister called me, and she's 14 years older than me. She said, "Little brother, I want you to take a look at a business opportunity." And she described it, Brian, and I said, "Oh, you're going to prison now? You're taking old people's houses? Our phones may be bugged. I don't want anything to do with that." And I poo-pooed it. I pushed it away. I said, "I don't want you to talk to me about that." A year later, some things happened. I went back and I said, "Hey, sis, tell me about that deal again. This reverse mortgage. It sounds bad. It sounds wrong." But there were 5 housing counseling agencies affiliated with the federal government in Greater Philadelphia. I called all 5. I had breakfast with 3 of them. I said, "What's the catch, the fine print, the aha, the gotcha?" I went to the federal government itself in Philadelphia, the Wanamaker building, and I sat down with them and I said, "This is your program. What's the aha, the gotcha, the fine print?" I spoke with Fannie Mae. I spoke with AARP. And after I did all that research, Brian, I came away with a wow moment that if this could be used in an appropriate way, honorable, ethical way, it could change people's outcomes. So that's where I started 25 years ago in this business. I'm 25 years into it. I've had 16,000 consumer-facing conversations. 3,000 people became my clients, and that's 2 important things. Number 1, I've talked to a lot of people. And number 2, I know that it's not an appropriate resource for everybody.
That's great. And then you speak on many stages too. So you talked about the 16,000 consumers, but you also teach advisors and other professionals in this industry. And that's how I got to meet you. But just so our audience is all on the same page here, can you hit us with some of the basics with the reverse mortgages? How do they work? I know there's a few different avenues you can go down. Share a little bit of that with us.
What is a reverse mortgage? Listen, Brian, if you're not careful, and you mentioned the reverse mortgage this upcoming weekend at the barbecue, I'll tell you what's going to happen. 3 people are going to go under the table. 3 people will leave the table, and your Aunt Janie may make a shank out of a plastic knife and fork. It's just dangerous to mention reverse mortgages. And I tell folks, listen, it's not new. It's not dangerous. It's not spooky. What is it? IJAM. If you're reading or watching or listening, just jot that down. IJAM. It's just a mortgage. It's just a mortgage. It's a home equity loan for retirees age 62 years or older that allows them to convert a portion of their home's value, like any home equity loan, into tax-free dollars without giving up ownership, coming off title, or having to make monthly loan payments. Hey, folks, it started in 1961 in America. It's now in over 23 countries, and America was late to the party. In 1988, at the seating of the 100th Congress, and the 40th President, Ronald Reagan, signed it into law as part of the federal government. So 36 years, the home equity conversion mortgage, nicknamed reverse mortgage, has been on the landscape, helping retirees improve retirement outcomes. So it's just a mortgage. I'm glad you're listening. I'm glad that Brian, you and Jason and the team have honored me to be able to come back and talk about this innovative tool.
Hey, did you get the trademark on it's just a mortgage? That's very catchy.
No, it is. I got a friend of mine, Martin Andelman, maybe 10 years ago. I heard him say it, and he's no longer in the space, so maybe I should trademark it. But it's catchy, right? iJam. I said, next time someone says, oh, that reverse mortgages or this or that, just yell out, iJam.
Right. It's so much more palatable, right? It's so much easier to digest. In the industry years ago, we had these things called junk bonds, right? And now Wall Street calls them high yield bonds. It's just got more attractiveness to it when we say it's just a mortgage there.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But yeah, so the one thing I was going to say is there is that stigma that we mentioned about these reverse mortgages and how they're looked at. And even before this, the NASD for a long time didn't even let financial advisors talk about these things. But that attitude, that landscape is starting to shift. And even with the middle class or the very affluent retirees are starting to look at these. So why do you think that landscape is starting to change across the industry?
Sure. It's real simple. Retirement is going to last longer than most people expected, be more expensive than most people predicted, and last longer. So last longer, be more expensive, less predictable. So when we're doing that, I ask the question, Brian, to the listeners, to the viewers, do you want to use all of your available assets when creating a retirement income plan? Does that make sense to you to use all of your available assets? And they say, oh, absolutely. And I said, let's talk about the 3 assets that most retirees have. Number one, they have their income bucket, Social Security, pension, maybe employment. Number 2, they've got their investment bucket, IRAs, 401ks, hippos, spiders, bitcoins, everything in that bucket. Or they have their insurance bucket, fixed and variable annuities, whole and term life insurance, these things. And I said, now you've got these 3 buckets, income, investments, insurance, but you've got some things that are going to come and draw from those buckets. I call those the 4 E's. You've got emergencies. Hey, Frisky, your cat ate a golf ball. She may make it to next week, but you may want to go over to the vet. You've got expenses that come. You went to Whole Foods and bought a bone-in ribeye, and you discovered the cows went on strike and things are just much more expensive since COVID. I said, you got enjoyment. I want to do something for the grandkids. I want to go on a trip. I want to do this. So emergencies, expenses, enjoyment, and then erosion. Things will put holes in your bucket. Future tax rates, inflation, market volatility. So here's the question to those who are watching or listening. Are those, you said, Don, I want to use all my available buckets. I said, is that all that you have? And people say, yeah, that's all that I have. I told this story last year, and I want to repeat it shortly when it comes to putting all your assets, your buckets. And it was about the 2007 Patriots. Brian, did you watch football?
Of course.
Oh, well, see, listen, some guys in the space, they don't watch football. Yeah. But I was telling the story about the 2007 Patriots. The first year Tom Brady got MVP, Randy Moss joined the team. They went undefeated to the Super Bowl. And that hadn't happened since the Dolphins and Don Shula. So I'm telling the story. And I said, Bill Belichick and the leadership did something so incredible that very few people in the history of the world even recognize what they did. On the kickoff, instead of starting 11 men, which you're allowed to do, they only put 10 men on the field on purpose. When they got the ball on offense, they did it again. 10 men versus 11. Defense, 10 men versus 11. As a matter of fact, for the entire game, every play, every down, they only put 10 men on the field. And at the end of that, the confetti flew, the whistle sounded, and the Patriots hoisted the Lombardi Trophy. And I said to the audience, have you ever heard that story of Belichick starting 10 men versus 11? And people were fact-checking and said, Don, I've never heard that. I said, because it's not true. It's not remotely true.
Right.
I said, what person on the biggest day, Super Bowl day, on the biggest stage, wouldn't put, even if they thought they were dominant, what person wouldn't put all of their available and best assets on the playing field? But that's what we do with retirement. See, we've got our income, investments, and insurances, but 87% of retirees have a whole nother bucket. They've got their home equity. 87% of retirees have home equity. And it's the largest concentration of wealth that they have. So the question is, if you're not incorporating home equity into a retirement income plan, aren't you really playing the Super Bowl with 10 men versus 11? You're not putting all your available assets on the field. So when that started to come up, your question was, what's happening? Why now? Because retirement is challenging. And once people begin to learn that the reverse mortgage is just a mortgage, and it's not your grandmother's mortgage, there are 52 retirement income strategies that we teach that says when you add this to your plan, whether a bucket plan or systematic withdrawal or flooring strategy, whatever you're using, it's going to increase the likelihood of a positive outcome in retirement. That's the shift, Brian, that's happening right now.
Yeah, that's great. And you said it with the 4 E's there. Longevity is a big one here, right? People are retiring in their 60s, maybe early 70s, and modern medicine has kept us alive longer and longer here.
Mhm.
It's easy to predict something over 5 years. If your retirement was only 5 years and you know what, your expiration date hits, guess what? That's a lot. It's easy to solve for. But it's a lot of people are having 20, 25, 30-year retirements. And when you have those longer retirements, you have this longevity risk in there. Hey, inflation kicks in. All those E's that you talked about really come into play here. So, Don, what are some other advantages when it comes to these reverse mortgages, and where can they be a fit for the consumer? Because one train of thought, and I always thought about this and I want your input, is what if the market goes down and you were living off the dollars that are in the market? Could you stop pulling on the market and go to the equity line? What are some possibilities here?
Wow, Brian, you're so smart here. Gosh, I thought they were giving me the B team today. I didn't know I was getting you. I'm going to share my screen. I want to talk through that because there are people listening and not just watching. But if you're on the screen, let me share something. When we talk about a reverse mortgage, it's just a loan. It's just a mortgage. Don, how much money is made available? If Mr. and Mrs. Flintstone have a $650,000 home, so there are 3 things that, and if you're writing, I want you to grab a pen and paper and write this down. So there are 3 things that the federal government looks at to determine the benefit amount of the reverse mortgage. Here are the 3 criteria. Number 1, the age of the youngest borrower. Someone has to be age 62. The other person only has to be age 18, except for in Texas, you have to be 62. Now, Alabama petitioned for 14, but Congress shut that down. Someone's got to be age 62. Number 2 is based off the value of your home. And number 3, the future projected interest rate. That's called the expected interest rate, the expected interest rate. Based off of these 3 things, a certain amount of money is made available, and that's called the net benefit amount. Now, underneath the base of the triangle, very important, any outstanding loans have to be paid off from the reverse mortgage, and what's left, folks, is called the line of credit. Now, this is what, Brian, you mentioned earlier, some of the angst and consternation with the regulators early in this program. Now, remember, I've been around 25 years, so I've seen a lot of things. Age, value of the home, interest rate gives you a benefit amount, subtract what you owe, and you get a line of credit. Now, look, folks, on the screen that you all are watching, I'm putting on the screen some projections for a line of credit. So what you see here, Brian, is a 65-year-old in a $600,000 home is eligible for a beginning line of credit of about $179,000. You see that? Now, these figures change. That was from October 2023, and there's more money available today. But notice, here's the most important part, that a reverse mortgage line of credit, folks, write this down. It's a GLOC, a growing line of credit, a Glock, not a weapon. Now, my family's from Kentucky. Every time I say that, someone wants to go out shooting. I said, no, it's not that type of weapon. It is a financial weapon. So, Brian, and those who are listening, the reverse mortgage, and this is what got NASD that morphed into Financial Regulatory Authority, FINRA, to change their position on reverse mortgages when they understood this, that the reverse mortgage started at $179,000, but the unused portion 20 years later, Brian, what has it grown to?
It's continuing to go. At 20 years later, was it 1.314 million?
Well, 20 years later, it's 778,000. So it started at 179. Now it's at 778, and 30 years later, it's at $1.6 million. I did a proposal the other day. It got up to $10 million, and people said, Don, that's impossible. I said, no, this is a document of the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. We have to put this stuff in writing. And the point is, the reverse mortgage line of credit, the growing line of credit, became the basis, the undergirding for all financial planning strategies. And it's what caused FINRA to change their position on reverse mortgages. Their position was only use reverse mortgages as a last resort until Dr. Barry Sachs and his brother, Dr. Stephen Sachs, and I was on the task force with them at the American College. They went and they said, why do you say that? And when they looked at it, they said, wow, they removed that language. They removed that language. And now the financial planning component comes into reverse mortgages. Now, I know J.L. Smith, and I got Jason's book. It's all written up over here. You were doing the bucket plan. I love that. When I read it, and I said, man, this is good. I said, because most people, if you don't have a plan, you have what I call the luck it plan. I hope it works out. Good luck. And then if you get with your guys, you have the bucket plan. And then I said to Jason, but folks who just give up altogether, I said, I wish I could find something that Ryan would luck it and bucket for folks who just want to give up entirely. But I couldn't find. So I called it the forget it plan. So
exactly right. And I always say the joke to people, I go, if you don't have a tax plan, whose tax plan do you have? You have the IRS's plan. Is that going to maximize and minimize taxes, right?
That's right. And now for your viewers, your listeners, the reverse mortgage, you take Mr. and Mrs. Flintstone's house, or you take your home. Age, the older you are, the more money you get, value of the home, and expected interest rate, and there's a certain amount of money made available to you. Now, what can you do with those dollars? I'm going to go back to the screen, and I hadn't shown this in a while, but this was what I shared with Jason and those folks, with those who are doing my favorite form of planning is bucket planning. Now, today, at the day of this recording, there's a podcast, the first national podcast that Morningstar did, completely dedicated to reverse mortgages. And they called me to do this podcast. And I called my friend, Dr. Wade Fowl, and I said, these are important people. They don't want just country on there. We need some. But it's out today. And that tells you something, that for Morningstar, a multi-billion-dollar entity, that say, we're going to take up the subject. We're going to dedicate 59 minutes to explaining why housing wealth is important to retirement income planning, is a very important milestone. But on the screen, in the bucket plan, anytime you're doing planning, time segmentation, you've got your now bucket, your soon bucket, or your later bucket, folks. You know that. Your now bucket is liquidity. You want to have a reserve in there. And I put the 3 E's: emergencies, expenses, and enjoyment. Your soon bucket is, hey, I need some money that I don't need right now, so I need it to be growing, inflation-minded. And then your later bucket is your long-term goals, your legacy, extended care. And here's what I said. Now, take that line of credit that I just gave you. And I said, look what happens. Housing wealth informs the noun bucket, right? A person says, and you mentioned it earlier, that 2022, the Flintstones are going to retire. They've got $1 million, and they're going to take out $40,000 a year. That's their plan at the end of the year. But at the end of 2022, they don't have $1 million, do they? They've got $780,000. And if they take out $40,000 on top of that, they started at $1 million, and because the market was down, now we only got X dollars. They're in real danger. But what happens if they had this bucket, this reverse mortgage bucket, that now we don't have to take money out of cannibalize or convert assets during a dip? We can use another source, let those assets to grow. And what we discovered at the American College in the research of Dr. Wade Fowl, if you did that, just one time in retirement, you significantly increase the probability of retirement success. If you use that bucket 4 times, meaning draw from your reverse mortgage versus a depleting asset during a bear market, you're going to have 10 to 14 years longer. So it becomes something that fills in the now bucket. What about the soon bucket? The reverse mortgage line of credit today, where's my sheet at? Is growing at about 8.1%. So the money in the reverse mortgage line of credit is growing faster than inflation. Hey, listener, hey, viewer, does it make sense if you had a reserve bucket with your income, investments, insurances that could keep pace or even surpass inflation in a tax-minded sense? Absolutely. And then the third bucket is your later bucket. It's growing, providing for extended care plan. And I do a whole thing on that. But you can see here, or you can listen to me, that says that the reverse mortgage line of credit now is able to be incorporated 52 different ways. I just broke it down in the bucket plan to say now, soon, or later. and it strengthens your plan and potentially gives you a greater legacy benefit. Or if you're still alive, like Dad is at 95, Mama is at 91, and Aunt Ethel died at 102. I said, I've got longevity in my family. I want to have every available asset working for me to hedge against the future. Brian, I told you to stop me if I get to talking too much. Now you need to jump in and say.
I know that, Don, but you're one of the greatest storytellers I've ever heard, so I gotta let you run with the runway a little bit. I'll put the leash back if we need to. But you said something profound in there, and I want you to elaborate on it, because you said it's growing at 8.1%, and it perked my ears up, and I'm sure everyone in the audience it perked their ears up to. The reverse mortgage growing at 8.1%. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that for us?
Sure. The home equity conversion mortgage, that's a legal name, HECM, of a reverse mortgage, started in 1988. That's why it started in 1961. But in 1988, it came under the control and auspices and oversight of the federal government. Now, when it started, it says, hey, we're going to make money available. Why? Because people are living longer, they're highly in debt, and most people have a house. But the only way to leverage that house, either you sell and move or you take out a mortgage and make payments. So with the reverse mortgage, you can keep your house and turn it into a reserve. What do we do? With the Flintstones, they've got a $650,000 home. They turned it into a $200,000 reserve. 1988, what do we do with the reserve? So baked into the program, it's a law that the unused portion of a reverse mortgage line of credit is growing. Currently at the 1-year Treasury bill plus 3% as the lender's margin and HUD's MIP. So the 1-year Treasury today is 5.1, and we add 3 to that gives you 8.1. That changes every week, but this is very powerful, folks. This is what got FINRA to say, wait a minute, if you knew that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, that you could have access to your home equity, you don't have to requalify, you can take it in, put it back, you would certainly want to inquire about how this could work on our behalf. So the growing line of credit grows simply because when they wrote the program, they said it grows.
Yeah, and thank you for that elaboration. You talked about, in this conversation, different types of reverse mortgages, right? I heard you mention a few different types there. So the question that we arise at is, it's not reverse mortgage in the sense of, hey, I'm just going to pull on this in one day, the bank owns my house?
No, listen, that's that story that people are going to hear at the barbecue. Same again. You're over at Cousin Tracy's house and Uncle Junebug comes out of her spare bedroom and everybody says, what are you doing in Tracy's spare bedroom? He says, I live here now. And folks said, you live here? And he said, oh yeah, listen, I got that reverse mortgage and I lost my house. And what happens, Brian? Everybody at the barbecue says, that's my family. Your family probably doesn't make that sound, but that's my family. And they say, I knew it. And they over at the Baptist church on Sunday, telling the deacons, you got to put an announcement out. Monday at the barber shop, Tuesday at the beauty salon. And by the end of the week, someone knew someone who had an uncle, who had a cousin, had someone who got a reverse mortgage and lost their house. And they say to me, get on this podcast, Don, what do you say about that? And I look right in the camera. And I tell people, cozy up next to your phone and listen to this. What Uncle Junebug said is 100% true. What? As he told the truth. He got a reverse mortgage and he lost his house. Don, you are the evildoer. I'm tuning out. Don't tune out yet.
There's hope, right?
Don't tune out. Now, Uncle Junebug didn't tell that these are real family. The names I use real family people. He didn't tell the whole truth. See, when you get a reverse mortgage, there are 4 things you have to do. They're pretty spooky and dangerous. Write them down. At least one person's spouse has to live in the property. You got to take care of it. You got to keep homeowners insurance in force, and you got to pay your property taxes. Those 4 things. Now, Uncle Junebug left out a very important part of the story. He got a reverse mortgage. He lost his house, but he did not lose his house because of the reverse mortgage. He hadn't paid his property taxes in 4 years. I don't know what part of the country you live in. Maybe you're Wyoming homesteader where that's not important. But for the rest of us that live in populated areas, you got to pay your property taxes or their share of sale tax liens or their consequences. So a lot of the spooky that people heard behind the scenes, underneath it, I just say, did they pay their taxes? I don't know. I can tell you, they didn't pay their taxes. And so the bank doesn't own the home. The bank does. It's a mortgage. Folks, when you get a mortgage, IJAM, it's just a mortgage. When you get a mortgage, does the bank own the home? No. They put a lien on your property. When you sell it or when you move, you pay them off whatever your balance is and you pocket the difference. That is the same with the reverse mortgage, right? You've got a $600,000 home. Mama got a reverse mortgage. 20 years later, her home is now worth $1.2 million. $1.2 million, 20 minutes. Let me turn this off here. And so it's worth $1.2 million. And people forget, homes appreciate typically double in value every 20 years. That's fairly conservative. So $1.2 million. Now, mama has a reverse mortgage. She may have a loan balance down the road. Let's just call it extra big. Let's call it $600,000. She took all the money out. She went down to the riverboat and she spent it all. She put it on red. It came up black. She lost all her money. And so her reverse mortgage is accruing interest. I'm making it big. 20 years down the road, her $600,000 home is $1.2 million. She still owns it. She dies. The children come in, sell mama's house for $1.2 million. They pay off her reverse mortgage balance, which is $600,000. But if you got $1.6 million and you owe $600,000, and then you got $1.2 million, and then you got $600,000 left. Yeah. So the heirs get $600,000. Well, Don, wait a minute. What if the house is worth less or the balance is worth more? Whatever the difference is between what the house is worth when mama moves or dies and what the reverse mortgage loan balance is, passes on to the heirs or the estate. Wait, what if mama owes you $600,000 and the house is worth $400,000? It's a great question. I said reverse mortgages are non-recourse loans, which means the lender can never require more than the home is worth. So the heirs are protected, the estate is protected, and that's a reverse mortgage, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so those are the mechanics of it. I want to make sure we get to some of the exciting applications, Brian, because I want the viewers and listeners to scratch their head and say, wow, I never thought of that.
Yeah, and we'll absolutely get there. And I think you brought up a great point with Uncle Junebug, is there's still some requirements you are in charge of when you have these reverse mortgages. But let's go off of the philosophy that you just had. We're going to use a $1.2 million home. But, Don, I already have an existing mortgage for $300,000. Traditional mortgage. Am I able to get a reverse mortgage on top of that? Or can I incorporate it into one? Give me an application there.
Thank you. Now, I don't know where your podcast goes or who's watching, but we don't have $1.2 million home in Falmouth, Kentucky. I just want you to know. And I know that's the neighborhood you live in. So let's bring it back to Bedrock. Let's just make it $650,000 here in Bedrock. Can we do that?
Sure.
So and by the way, this is the number one strategic use of the reverse mortgage, by the way. A client has a home and they've got a mortgage on their property, $650,000 home. Let's say they've got a $200,000 mortgage. This is very common. Hey, folks, if you're over the age of 62 and you're watching this or listening, how many of you all have a mortgage, a second mortgage, a home equity loan, or a home equity line of credit? One of those four. Just put your hand up in the air. Let me see it. That's most of you. That's most of you. So coming into retirement with a mortgage is a big deal. Now, some folks say, Don, I can handle the mortgage. I'm looking for some over here. Don, I can handle this. But let's take a look at the Flintstones here. Give me 1 second, Brian.
No, you're good.
And I'm going.
What I'm hearing is we're using a $650,000 home value, and we have an existing mortgage of $200,000. How is this going to turn out for us? What is the number one thing that we can use here to make this all sit right?
And it's a very powerful thing. So listen, I'm going to share my screen for those who can see it. For those, I'll talk you through it. If eliminating a monthly mortgage payment meant your retirement savings could last significantly longer, would you want to see how it works? Take that in. If eliminating a monthly mortgage payment meant your retirement savings could last significantly longer, let's take that in. So Steve and Barbara, here on the screen, I'm going to talk you through if you're listening. They have $500,000 in an IRA, and they believe they want to take out $30,000 initial withdrawal rate. That's pretty aggressive. I don't think they're going to make it, but that's what they want. They've got a $200,000 mortgage, and everybody has a mortgage, got a payment, a principal and interest payment of $1,500 a month. Now, their reverse mortgage benefit, based on the age, home value, and interest rate, they're eligible to receive in the middle of their triangle $224,000. Now, Brian, remember, A reverse mortgage is a first mortgage. So we're going to pay off that $200,000 that they owe, and that leaves them with a little money left over. Now, what does this do for Steve and Barbara? Listen, folks, when you eliminate a mandatory monthly mortgage payment, MMMP, some things happen. One of the questions I often ask Brian, I say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I see that you, like me, are already making a monthly mortgage payment. I'm curious. If you had a choice, would you rather that payment be mandatory or voluntary? What would you choose? And Brian, everybody I talk to says, duh.
I want to be a volunteer in this example.
Voluntary. So now most people don't know. If you're over the age of 62, there's a loan that allows any homeowner in the United States over the age of 62 to have an optional payment mortgage, to turn their existing mortgage into a voluntary payment mortgage. They didn't know that. That's called the home equity conversion mortgage. So the benefit for this family is, number one, they get rid of a $1,500 a month payment. Stop right there. If you're watching or listening and all of a sudden you don't have to spend $1,500 a month, what does that do for you? Don, I can make it voluntary. What does that do? Freedom, flexibility, control, spend less, save more, withdraw lower, sleep better, give to the grandchildren, hedge against risk, right? It gives you a ton of control. Try missing 3 months of payments with your lender now. You'll find out. And I said to them, now, it takes about $1,900 pre-tax to net $1,500. So if we eliminated a monthly mortgage payment, we're going to retain $22,000 in your retirement savings. Now, Steve and Barbara were trying to draw $30,000 a year, Brian. That was pretty aggressive, wasn't it? They don't have to do that. Now they only have to take out $8,000 a year, have the lifestyle they wanted, and we build longevity into their plan. Not only that, so we extend the life of their saving, but now we're not taking out $22,000 of provisional income or ordinary income tax. We can lower their taxes, maybe even get them into a lower tax bracket. Folks, the most common use of a reverse mortgage is to eliminate a monthly mortgage payment. I wrote an article that was in Retirement Daily called 10 Benefits for Eliminating a Monthly Mortgage Payment. Google that, Don Graves, Retirement Daily, and you'll see it, or somehow you can connect with me. But it's real simple. It's very powerful. There's a video that goes along with that. I just gave you 3 benefits of eliminating a monthly mortgage payment. There are 10. Brian, if your client is looking for longevity, I don't want to run out of savings, eliminating a monthly mortgage payment speaks to that. If they're looking for lifestyle, hey, when I retired, I wanted to play pickleball 3 days a week and go golf, and I wanted to go eat. But now retirement, I'm saying, do we have it? We're going to make it. We can get rid of a monthly mortgage payment. You're going to create some lifestyle, some longevity, some long-term care. You're going to address some common concerns with one simple thing. Get rid of your monthly mortgage payment, which a ton of people have. So that's one common strategy, probably the most common.
But Don, you also said there are other strategies. Could you give me maybe 2 or 3?
Sure. And I get a phone call from a financial advisor, a large company. Says, I've got Mr. Bigwig. That's not his real name. I made that up. And Mr. Big is a retired CEO of a large multinational pharmaceutical company. That's true, whose name you would know. He's got $5 million in investable assets, and he has said to his advisor, I want you to look at a reverse mortgage for him. The advisor says, well, that's not for you. That's for poor people. That's for folks that don't have anything. And he says, no, I want you to look at it for me. He wanted to do some financial planning, that he wanted to buy a life insurance policy that would benefit his wife, his children, his grandchildren. The premiums were going to be $15,000 per month. So this is a large life insurance policy. He's passed the medical. So the advisor reluctantly calls me after 3 months. And he says, I represent Mr. Big, and he's got $5 million, and I'm only doing this because he's on me to do it. And I said, you need $15,000 a month for the premiums, $180,000 a year. Just take it out of his portfolio. Oh, his hair caught on fire. I don't want to do that. We can have sequence risk. We can have volatility where there be taxes on that. I don't want to do that. I said, okay. He says he thinks a reverse mortgage could help. I said, okay, but what we're trying to solve is he wants a multi-generational estate plan for his children, grandchildren, and his wife of a multi-million-dollar policy, that there's some tax efficiencies there. And he's got to cover the $15,000 a month premium, and he's just looking for some different conversations. So watch this, folks. He lived in a $4.5 million home at the Jersey Shore in Stone Harbor. So we drew the triangle for him: age, value of the home, $4.5 million, and the expected interest rate at the time. Now, underneath the triangle, Brian, he had $2.1 million in mortgages and loans against his property. Every month, folks, he was paying $21,000 a month, principal and interest. He was okay with that. He was Mr. Big. That wasn't a big deal. But the reverse mortgage, based off of his age, a $4.5 million home, made $2.2 million available in the middle of the triangle. The first thing it did, just like the last couple we saw, was it pays off the $2.1 million. Hey, Brian, when we paid off that $2.1 million, we have now eliminated a mandatory monthly mortgage payment of $21,000 a month. We just needed to find $15,000 a month. So the premiums for him to execute his estate plan was already in his house. It's not impacting his cash flow because he's already doing that. So when we saved him $21,000 a month, he could do the premiums for $15,000 and have $6,000 a month left over to do other planning. That's an advanced case of something that happened. Something a little bit more simple is we had a lady who bought her son a house up in Chicago, outside of Chicago. And she had $1 million in qualified plan, and she went out and spent $452,452 to buy her son a house with cash. And she didn't tell her advisor. He didn't find out till later. And he called her, "Oh, Margaret, oh gosh." She says, "I've done it. It's my only child. I did it. I'm happy." He couldn't afford a mortgage. I didn't want one. So she did some gifting, but he said the taxes on the 452, it may be more like 600, 650. Margaret, you're going to cannibalize your portfolio. It's going to go from 100,000 to 350, 400. She said, "I don't care. That's my son. I love it. I don't care." She didn't know the consequence that she's going to have to give up some lifestyle. So he's running all around. What can I do? He's calling some buddies, and someone in the study group said, maybe a reverse mortgage. His hair caught on fire. "No, that's not for my client. That's for poor people who are rubbing two nickels together to start a fire, eat their last meal. That's not for my people." And he said, "Just see what Don can say." So they called me. "Hey, folks, I drew the triangle. Mm-hmm. Age of the youngest borrower, value of the house, current interest rate." And I said to him, "I've got good news and bad news." He says, "What's the bad news?" I said, "The bad news is I cannot recoup $452,000. He says, "What's the good news?" "I can recoup $438,000. She's going to have a tax bill of $14,000. I know that's a pain point, but I think she can absorb that." So we did the reverse mortgage for that lady within 60 days, 56 days, because that's how long she had after taking out a qualified plan for taxes were going to hit. So we replenished $438,000, got her back up to a sustainable level. Her son still had the house, and everybody went off free and happy. And there are 52 strategies. Here, my newest book here, Eliminate a Monthly Mortgage Payment. Purchasing a home with a reverse mortgage. Now, really, Brian, if I went into buying a home with the reverse mortgage, people would just lose their mind. The FCC would shut down this podcast because it's so ridiculous that most people don't know. You can buy your next home using a reverse mortgage. And I did an article with a guy at the American College. He won a prize for this. And I said, we take a person from an $800,000 home, move them to a $500,000 home, and left them with about $550,000 left over in cash to put back into their retirement savings. That's called the reverse repurchase. That started as part of the Homeowners Economic and Recovery Act, HERA, of 2008. That's the newest type of reverse mortgage. The one I mentioned before, the jumbo reverse mortgage, that goes up to home values of $10 million. That's how we were able to do those big numbers. And there's the standard home equity conversion mortgage. So those are your three primary types: your standard HECM, your jumbo, and then your reverse repurchase that allows you to buy your next home and actually just reimagine what retirement would be like. I tell folks, what if you can move to your next, last, and best home, increase your cash flow, reduce your expenses, and add $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $800,000 we did the other day back to your retirement savings? Would you want to see how it works? And folks, this is beyond the 60-second commercial on television. We've gone beyond that now. Brian and Jason are bringing to you something that is absolutely shaping the retirement planning conversation, creating a backup reserve to fund all parts of your retirement, buying a house, eliminating a monthly mortgage payment. My latest article was 7 benefits or 7 ways reverse mortgages help Social Security planning. And make sure you get that. I'll put a link in there.
That'd be great.
But I did that. Ed Slott and his folks and Heather Schreiber, I wrote a short article for them, and then I expanded it. And Heather came on, and she's the Social Security guru, and she loved it. She said, Don, I had no idea that incorporating a reverse mortgage could do these 7 things for Social Security planning.
Don, there's a lot of education you shared with us. A few last things here is if they want to find out more information besides the articles you mentioned, pause the podcast, go back 10 seconds, write down those articles, get a hold of Don's book, but anywhere else they can learn about reverse mortgages from you.
Sure. Let me give you folks 2 educational places. Write this down, folks. I created a master class. It's me talking and going through soup to nuts. www.housingwealthmasterclass.com. Real simple. www.housingwealthmasterclass.com. Go there, watch it, stop, pause, rewind, watch this, and I cover soup to nuts. So certainly go there. And if you say, Don, how do I get in touch with you? AskDonGraves.com. www.askDonGraves.com. That'll get you to me. We can connect if you've got some questions. But those 2 resources, listen, folks, get the education. Get the education that the Book of Life says people perish because of lack of knowledge. And I said, make sure you get all your good education. Don't be saying wrong things at the barbecue coming up. And remember, if someone says reverse mortgages, that took Mr. Johnny's house. Just scream at him. I jam.
Yep. And sometimes, you know what? Get all the facts of the story so your Uncle Junebug doesn't tell you the wrong thing, right? He gave you 90% of the story, but the most important caveat, he didn't pay the real estate taxes, as we talked about before.
Hey, listen, nobody's going to say that. I had a fight with someone at Philadelphia City Council. I said, no one's lost their house to reverse mortgages. I was at a conference. This guy pops up in the front row. He says, I'm so-and-so Philadelphia City Council. Every week we got people losing their house to reverse mortgage. I screamed back. Not a single person has lost their house because of reverse mortgage. He screamed back. I said, they didn't pay their taxes. And I said, the city of Philadelphia issued a notice of foreclosure and sheriff's sale. We had nothing to do with that. He said, that's not true, blah, 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 blah. I said, you're going to owe me an apology, and I want you to call me. Here's my card. He called me. He called 4 days later, and he says, Don, 17 members of Philadelphia City Council. I investigated these reverse mortgage complaints. Not a single homeowner, not one, had paid their taxes.
Yep.
He says, I apologize. Not only did he apologize, he says, I want to have you come down to the Grand Rotunda, Philadelphia City Hall, a famous building, and I want you to do a workshop on what we may not know about reverse mortgages for the City of Philadelphia City Council. And so people just say things. They don't know. They hear stories. You don't know what happened to your neighbor. You said, oh, the kids didn't get the house.
Exactly.
And I always say when you hear horror stories, I ask 3 questions. Why did Mr. Jones and Mr. Jones get a reverse mortgage to begin with? What did they do with the money? How come they didn't tell their children? I said, you don't know any of these things. And I'm sorry, but there's a reason, there's a purpose, there's a strategy. Now, we're not talking about that. The J.L. Smith audience, the J.L. Smith client is a more sophisticated borrower. I tell folks that the majority of my clients don't need a reverse mortgage. I said, I don't need air conditioning in Arizona. I don't need to get my teeth cleaned from the dentist. I don't need, it's a lot of things. Now, I want it once I discover what it can do. So if you knew that I could have a bucket that during a down market, I don't have to draw from assets and convert or cannibalize them and lock in the loss, but I can have a whole different bucket that's growing at 8% that could surpass $1 million and make sure my retirement, I have peace of mind. You would want to know about that. So I think J.L. Smith, Brian, I thank you for taking people beyond the 60-second commercial to begin learning about holistic, comprehensive retirement income planning, incorporating all of their available resources, their income bucket, insurance, investments, and their housing wealth bucket.
Exactly. Don, it was a pleasure having you, but one last thing for you. If you had one message to leave to the world, what would that message be?
Wow. A financial message or just a message?
Whatever your heart tells you, Don.
My heart tells me, make sure you get plugged into a source that's greater than you. Because if you're plugged into the source, then you'll always have the resource.
I love it. I love it, Don. It was a pleasure having you. Your storytelling's second to none, and people know how to get a hold of you now. Looking forward to seeing you here in the future. But thank you for your time today. It was a blessing to have you on the J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you for listening to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. We hope we inspired you to make changes so you can live your best life. If you want to find out more about what we do, or if you want to have a holistic wealth and health financial plan, please call 456-833-7000. Please subscribe to the podcast and share it widely with your friends and family. Financial planning and advisory services are offered through Prosperity Capital Advisors, PCA, an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Ohio. J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth Management and PCA are separate, non-affiliated entities. PCA does not provide tax or legal advice. Insurance and tax services offered through J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth Management are not affiliated with PCA. Information received from this podcast should not be viewed as individual investment advice. Product discussions and illustrations are hypothetical in nature and will vary based on many factors, including, but not limited to, age, health, product, insurance carrier, and product design. You should consult the insurance carrier website and policy for detailed information. For information pertaining to the registration status of PCA, please contact the firm or refer to the investment advisor public disclosure website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. For additional information about PCA, including fees and services, send for our disclosure statement as set forth on Form ADV from PCA using the contact information herein. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money.